Whether you're a news junkie, looking for something to listen on your commute, or just want to stay informed, we've got you covered. If you find any of these stories particularly interesting, be sure to leave a comment and let us know. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all the latest news. So without further ado, let's dive into today's stories. How did your school bully get what they deserved? Story 1. There's this guy at my high school. Let's call him Robert. Robert and his friends would often pick on the teachers and other students. I have him in multiple classes. He has done plenty to me in the past, such as force me to do an entire 2-person lab, which included holding a long string, swinging it, holding a ruler and measuring it while timing it all at the same time. He did nothing and went to go to his buddies and talk about how I made him do everything. He also shoved all my stuff on my desk out of his way, put his stuff down, and steal my assigned seat so he could talk to his friends, then later taking a chair and slamming it on my big toe that I had stubbed earlier that day and made fun of me for saying a quiet ow. Now he would also berate and humiliate and constantly interrupt teachers, especially this sweet lady named Miss Reed who teaches history. She is so sweet and always gives snacks and extra credit out, and even lets us listen to music or watch movies during the holidays. He was so mean to her for no reason. One day I got grouped up with him, and I got assigned the leader of the group because the teacher thought that since he was in the group, someone had to have the guts to tell him to shut up and do his work or go nope in a corner without the teacher getting in trouble. And that's what I did. He complained and complained that he didn't get that role and all the others were taken while he went off with his friends. He sat down and started acting like a 2-year-old who didn't get the toy he wanted in a Happy Meal. So I told him, "Okay, look, Robert, this is a heavily graded assignment that we all need to take part in. And believe me, we don't want to be in a group with you either, but here we are. So you can either sit down, shut up, and do your work, or go whine." He actually did do some of his work. And yes, I was mean, because you know what? He deserved it. Also, I had a migraine and my head felt like it was going to explode. He actually came up to me the next day in front of his friends, looked me dead in the eyes, and apologized. This has never happened. Not to a teacher, not to anyone. It caught me and everyone else way off guard. And it was a genuine apology, not one of those forced or fake ones. He looked sorry. Said it in an ashamed voice and not in his smirky poop-eating way. Too long didn't read? The class clown/bully got yelled at by a girl who had a migraine and was genuinely done with his poop, and he manned up and apologized for the first time. You'd think that might have led to some worse action from the bully. Apparently this time it didn't. I wish all interactions with bullies could be this simple, just to be able to stand up to them. I mean, this bully talked to teachers disrespectfully. What was he thinking? Story 2. When I was in my first year of high school, I had this whole situation that happened to me. There was this boy, we'll call him Jim, that was often picking on girls that were sitting on a bench in the main hall. He was a first year, too. Me, being the girl that wanted to put up justice in my 11-year-old mind, went to fight him. It went off to the point where teachers had to separate us. You may think that he's the one that's going to get owned, but sadly no. We would often fight, and maybe after a week, a rumor started to spread between the two of us, that we would both be in love, which is the reason why we fight. I don't know why people thought of this, but I would get the same comment. "Hey, are you going to see your lover, Jim?" I tried to stay cool about it and always responded no and to stop asking me, even though I was fuming inside. But one day, a girl that we'll call Abigail and her friend came up to me. Now, she was the problem of the story. She was one of my classmates and would always make comments about how I looked, be pretty snarky about it, and tried to find a way to hurt me morally. We didn't like each other, obviously, and then she came up and asked me the same question I heard for the 100th time. "Are you dating Jim?" At that moment, I just couldn't take it anymore. I just saw red. I took her head and one of her friends and just knocked them together. I then walk away, still mad. Some minutes later, I arrived late for my English class. I entered the room, excusing myself. The teacher stopped me and asked me why I knocked the head of Abigail and her friend together. I just told her the whole situation, And then the teacher turned to the two girls and told them to stop asking the question. I didn't get in trouble for it. I still remember the two girls holding their heads like they seemed hurt and feeling pride about it. I could have handled it more carefully and not have to hurt anyone about it, but I think it's the fact that it was Abigail that asked me the question and couldn't just take the fact that she was going to mock me about it. Afterward, I think that a new rumor spread, and no one asked me the question ever again. You know, I thought that story was going to end up with her and Jim actually ending up dating, to spite all the rumors. It didn't occur to me that a new challenger would enter the story, and it feels so good to know that she did what was necessary and didn't get in trouble for it. It's not entirely a drastic thing she did. She didn't draw blood or anything. Story 3. I actually have a perfect story for this one. When I was probably a few months old, my mom's little brother, my uncle, was still in high school, and my parents were younger and still did things outside of home quite a bit, and decided they'd go to one of the high school football games as a nice way to get out of the house, and brought me with them. So we went with my grandparents and uncle. We were all just enjoying the game when, all of a sudden, water balloons were being launched over the field fence and into the crowd in game. They weren't really hitting anyone, so no one really took notice, until they started hitting people. And at some point, one water balloon hit me square in the face, and my mom was furious. At the time, she was arguing with her parents and decided to leave anyway, and we left on our way home. But on the way home, we encountered someone. Right there on the road, we saw the culprits of the water balloons still doing their thing. My dad said he instantly realized who they were and went to stop my mom from getting out, but it was too late. He looked to the side to stop her, and she wasn't there. And he looked forward and saw Mom letting into the biggest guy there. Apparently, they were all the popular jocks, and some were skipping the game for this prank. And they all tried to shrug her off like, yeah, whatever. But that only ticked my mom off more, and my 5'5" mom slapped the ever-living hell out of the probably 6-foot football captain. And they all got in their truck, which they were using as the water balloon slingshot, and sped off scared. Later, probably halfway through the next week, my uncle calls my mom. Now, keep in mind, my mom didn't know these guys were on the sports team or popular. They were just a bunch of jerkwads to her. But my uncle calls and asks her what the heck did she do. My mom, confused, asks what did she do. And my uncle explains to my mom that everyone was making fun of those guys at school because many people watched them get shooed out and then slapped by my mom. And everyone knew it was my uncle's sister. So, in the end, they got the short end of the stick being made fun of for a while about this. And I think they got shooed out by the principal, too. Too long didn't read? 3-month-old me got hit in the face with a water balloon by the school jocks, and in return, they got slapped, made fun of, and chewed out. Oh, this is mom wrath right here. Full-on peak mom wrath. I mean, your son or sibling gets hit in the face with a water balloon when they're a few months old? You're gonna see red. You're gonna do what this mom did. You're gonna stand up to whoever it is that caused their baby to get hit with a water balloon. And you're gonna make them pay. And this mom did even more than she thought she did after slapping this guy. They got humiliated. You don't mess with mom. Story 4. I have a great story. So I've been going to a private school for 11 years now for 5 straight years. I was bullied every single day until grade 7, or for me in Canada, Quebec, we call it one high school. So during the summer, they somehow, I don't know what happened, but they stopped bullying. I don't know if they had a group chat where they all agreed to not talk or hint at it when the new year started, since maybe they realized that what they were bullying me about was a bad habit that I had gotten rid of 2 years into getting bullied, and didn't want all the new kids to know and start it all over again. There are a lot of new kids in part because there are more classes and more students per class. So I was surprised, obviously in a good way, and came back kind of confused that not a single person had even come to bother me. Obviously, they kept being jerkwads to everyone else, which is, I guess, to be expected as they're rich brats and popular kids with disposable friends that are objects to get out of trouble. So anyway, Skip past to third year. Nothing has happened much except a little problem with some girls making a tiny hint towards what happened, though that never reproduced itself. So during lunch break in fall was like 5 degrees Celsius out, and me, my friends, and some of their friends are playing soccer, and the jerkwads come over, grab the ball, and hurdle it over the fence and into the river. We tell them, what the hell? And they're like, bro, chill, I can buy like 1,000,000 of them. Now you see, me and my friend, we're having none of it, and went to see one of the guards and told him. We obviously got called snitches after that, but the guard was usually chill. But when he went to see them, he went full beast mode and threatened them that they were going swimming in the river to get the ball. So they think he's joking, but he brings them down to the beach, and then you can see the terrified looks on their faces, though. He goes back to chill mode and says, "Nah, I'm kidding." Then, when they're walking back, he turns around and says, "But next time," then proceeds to point at the river. From what I saw, they never did it again. Story 5. When I started in middle school, I had to move to a new district, so didn't know anybody and had anxiety back then. I was a nerd, and the school I went to was largely gang-affiliated. The teachers were fans of clowning on students for not being intelligent and typically refused to help students that were struggling. I could see the look of frustration in some of the students' eyes, and when I saw some of my classmates looking like they were just giving up on themselves, I helped them out and explained it in a better way. I guess I earned a lot of respect for that and sticking up for people when teachers would poop on them just for trying to learn. One day, this guy thought it would be funny and pervy to go around trying to touch girls inappropriately. He touched my upper thigh and ran off before I could react. After class, one of the girls I helped with math beat the hell out of him and threw him down the stairs. The teacher came out after hearing the commotion and wanted to know what was happening. She said, "He fell down the stairs," and the teacher wasn't buying it because the girl had a bad reputation. The teacher asks me because I'm known for being a good student, and I corroborated her story. Being respectful of others pays off. Update. He came to school the next day on crutches and apologized. She was maybe like 20 feet away watching, so I knew she made him apologize. I sometimes wonder what happened to some of those people because I moved a few years later. I've had people contact me on Facebook since then saying that I changed their lives in some way. I've had many instances like that in my life where just stepping in and doing good deeds or saying something when someone needs to hear it really makes a difference. Story 6. Long story short. I punched him in the face. He and I were friends up until 6th grade when he and another friend started bullying me, though mostly him. I don't remember why. I was pretty meek as a kid, and also overweight, so that might have been it. I never told anyone. My parents would have believed me, looking back, but I was 11, and it was almost always 2-1, and I wasn't the bravest kid ever. It was also mostly verbal, though it did get physical sometimes. Well, you know how pent-up anger goes. I think it was a few weeks before the end of the school year when I finally lost it and punched him in the face. I'd like to think I knocked him off his feet when I did, but I don't remember, and honestly, I probably didn't. I remember the look of shock on his face, though. For the life of me, I'll never know why he didn't tattle on me, because he was almost certainly the type who would back then. Whatever the case, his family moved away that summer, and I've never seen or heard of him since. My other friend apologized not long after. I accepted it, but we were never all that close after that, and we stopped hanging out altogether a few years later. For some kids, it's like a toddler with a toy that makes this loud noise. The toddler's gonna keep pressing that button as it continues to make that noise. If you're gonna react in a way that makes the bully laugh, they're gonna keep picking on you. This person finally did what he didn't expect. Stood up to him. Kind of unfortunate that it had to be physical, but at least it stopped the bullying. Story 7. In elementary school, I used to be a bit of a bully hunter. It happened because some guys were picking on my friend, and I continued to fight bullies until 6th grade. I attended junior high school without any incidents. I entered high school and somehow entered the sights of some bullies. For some reason, they intimidated me. I spent most of a school year afraid and stressed. One day, the lead bully tried to knee me in the spheres. I was entering the second floor of the school and had my books in front of me, and they blocked the knee. My books scattered, and he walked away laughing. I looked down at my books, and then up at him walking away. I remember charging at him, and then I was told later I had body-tackled him to the floor and started smashing his face with the back edge of a book. It got pretty bloody. I ended up suspended for a month, but I lost all fear of him and his buddies. His friends pulled up on me in a back lane wanting to intimidate me, but I picked up a big rock and dared them to try getting out. They drove off, and I wasn't bothered for the next 2 years of high school. I did meet that guy I beat with a book years later. It was on a bus. He got on and saw me. I smiled and waved. He stayed near the front of the bus and never tried to bother me, and I didn't bother him. I'll be honest, I did feel a little bit of petty satisfaction from him avoiding me on the bus. Story 8. I have a story. When I was around 12, some 13 years ago, there was a guy at my school who had a reputation for being a massive bully. He decided one day to mess with me and my partner while we were waiting for our teacher to arrive. Me and my friend were kicking my pencil case between us like it was a soccer ball when he came out of nowhere, pushed my friend aside, and kicked my pencil case really hard into the wall, breaking my favorite pencil. I, a socially awkward teen with mild anxiety and the Asperger syndrome, was not having it. I immediately lost my temper, stormed up to him, and punched him in the face. Mind you, he was at least 2 years older than me. He punched me back hard in the stomach, and a short fight ensued. We were sent to the principal's office, and our parents were called. I learned later that one of the teachers was actually really glad that this happened, since my actions were one of the few times the bully got what he deserved. I became somewhat of a hero amongst the teachers that day. Story 9. I got my own story. In primary school, year 2 or 3, there was this guy who'd sprint past me and tear buttons off my shirt, laughing while he did. My parents were getting really angry with me because they thought I was doing it, since my 6-year-old brain didn't feel the need to tell anyone this was happening. I figured I'd deal with it myself eventually. Well, as it turned out, I did. One day, he decided he was going to rip 2 buttons off my shirt in a single day. After the first one, I saw him running at me again, and I was thinking about the dressing down I'd get when I got home. So as he tried to run past, I swung my arm around and completely clotheslined him. He stopped mid-step and hit the ground hard. I don't remember anything after that until the teachers pulled me off him. Apparently, I was just laying into him with punches mounted in full top position. I had to sit outside the principal's office until my parents arrived, but after I explained to them, they refused to let the school punish me. They had a yelling match with the principal until our school sergeant, disciplinary officer, and ex-military drill instructor walked in, sat down, and listened to the story. He patted me on the back and made me run a few laps of the oval before I went home. He was the only staff member I ever respected at that place. Story 10. A little late, but my mom told me about this one instance in elementary school. One day, I was sitting at lunch with a friend, let's call her Abby. As I was talking to Abby about what we would play at recess and if we could come over to my house later, this boy, I'll call him Derek, walks up to Abby and takes her milk carton. Apparently, Derek was picking on Abby for weeks, and the teachers did nothing about it. As Derek started taunting Abby, I stood up and told him to give her the milk back. Instead, he opened the milk carton and started drinking it. Now, I was known for having pretty bad anger issues at the time, so in the middle of him drinking the milk, I apparently punched him in the gut, then grabbed the milk from him and gave it back to Abby. Of course, I was sent to the principal's office, and they tried to suspend me. However, when my mom heard the story, she said, "So you're telling me you plan to suspend my child for standing up to her friend that was getting picked on for weeks when teachers didn't do anything themselves? You suspend my kid for this and I'll take it to the school board." Needless to say, I wasn't suspended, and I even got a banana split as a reward. Story 11. I was in this one. I was the proverbial quiet kid. I took a lot of crap and rarely raised my voice. One day, a bully pushed me in the hall on the way to recess. Not just a push, a shove, which catapulted me into the lockers and hurt like hell on the way down. Told the teacher I tripped and let it go. At recess, I planned it well. I was the smallest of my cousins, and even though the kid wasn't much bigger than me, I knew if I was going to do anything about it, I'd need my full body weight. I waited for him on top of the jungle gym, since that had the best handholds, and when he was about to go down the slide, I pushed myself up and kinda threw myself feet first at him. He flips over the slide and lands on his back on the gravel below. You can tell he wanted to cry or scream, but as you can imagine, his lungs were empty. I decided I was still mad and hopped down after him and started beating the hell out of him. Can't say my punches did much, but it was cathartic as hell. Teacher eventually pulled me off, and he never messed with me again. What's the weirdest thing a babysitter did to you? Story 1. I have a memory that caused so much mental trauma. I can't have Cousin soap products anywhere near me without the smell making me retch. When I was between 4 or 5, my mom decided to take me to live in England from Northern Ireland. We had to stay with relatives for a while so my mom could work and be able to rent out our place, whilst I was in the care of an adult cousin and her 2 daughters who were almost 10 years older than me. It was very strange for me, being an undiagnosed autistic child. One day, I was watching TV by myself and heard a word I'd never heard before, unaware it was a swear word. Me, being an innocent 4 to 5-year-old, I walked up to my adult cousin as her daughters were helping her in the kitchen, and I asked her, "What does—" Okay, in my script it has just 4 asterisks. I don't know which word it is. You can probably see it in the captions. Let's all just assume it's a bad word, okay? "What does this mean?" I kid you not. That's when stuff really hit the proverbial fan. Next thing I knew, she had grabbed my wrist and started hauling me towards the upstairs bathroom, one of her daughters holding my other arm and the other pushing me upstairs from behind. My adult cousin used her body to pin me facing the bathroom sink, and her eldest daughter grabbed a bar of soap, handing it to her mom. Then she tried to push it into my mouth, but I clamped my lips and teeth shut, so her younger daughter pinched my nose until I had to take a breath through gritted teeth. The bar of soap was forcefully grated against my teeth, and when I tried to struggle, my adult cousin gave her daughter the soap, used both arms to pin my head still, and her daughter continued rubbing the soap between my lips and teeth. After perhaps 5 to 10 minutes of this, which honestly felt like hours of torture, my adult cousin stopped the soap attack, led me down the hall and into my designated bedroom. Her younger daughter pulled the duvet back, and I was legit thrown into bed. Then they covered me up, still fully dressed, left the room, and closed the door on me. I spat pieces of soap onto the duvet, just curled up and cried in absolute confusion. I was so scared by how aggressive their attack was. I was too afraid to even tell my mom what they did. I became a whole lot quieter around them after that, because I didn't want to endure that ever again, and I refused to play the Nintendo with those cousins ever since. I know now that nothing justifies what they did to me, even if I did use a swear word. I told my mom about it in my mid-20s, and she honestly didn't know what to say to that. But at least she now understands why I refuse to allow cousin soap products anywhere near me. Thankfully, I didn't have to see those cousins anymore, because we eventually moved back home to Northern Ireland when I was around 7 or 8 years old. But one of the daughters spoke to me a couple years ago just to say, whilst also laughing about it, "Oh, do you remember that time you swore and we washed your mouth out with soap? Shrew, you attacked a 5-year-old just for asking what the word meant. I'm quite certain that I won't ever forget that." There's an old saying, "The axe forgets, the tree remembers." This was totally uncalled for. Cartoons, movies, and TV shows of old like to joke about how some kid gets his mouth washed out with soap, but this is the most aggressive version of that I've ever heard of. This kid didn't know that was a bad word. They were asking what it was. They did not deserve that at all. Story 2. My time with babysitters wasn't the best. I swear they wanted to unalive me. I only had 2 babysitters in my life. One was a random teenage girl. The other was my older sister when she was old enough, as she is 8 years older than me. I don't remember the first babysitter, as I was just a baby. But my mom told me about how she ran me a bath and left me there, and I almost drowned. My mom figured this out because I guess I would freak out every time she would try and bathe me. I would leave deep scratches in her, trying to get away from the tub and the water. It took my mom around 6 months to get me to be able to be in the bath with her and not freak out. I still get scared of having to dunk my head underwater of any sort to this day, but I can deal with it better. With my sister? Oh man. She would chase me and my other older sibling, this one being 2 years older than me, with a freaking chef's knife. We had to barricade ourselves in the bathroom till our parents came home. She would also try to smother or suffocate us. Several times I had to pull her off of my older sibling as she had a pillow over their face and they couldn't escape on their own. She also used to try and drown me in our grandparents' pool during the summer. So I wouldn't go swimming unless my papa, my grandfather, would swim with me if my sister was going to swim. There are so many other things she tried, but those are the main ones she always did to my older sibling and I. The less lethal, but has given me my fear of mirrors for the rest of my life, was when she locked me in the bathroom without any lights and a singular candle. She then proceeded to yell through the door, "Bloody Mary," 3 times. It was freaking terrifying, especially after you were forced to watch a horror movie based around Bloody Mary or something similar. Yeah, my older sibling and I don't talk to her at all anymore. Did they ever tell the mom about this when they got older? If they did the mom believe them? I totally understand if they never want to talk to her for the rest of their lives. That is just scary. That's file a permanent restraining order against them scary. Story 3. I remember when my sister and I had babysitters. We had a pair of twins, Jamie and Jessie, that would switch out halfway through. We would spend half the day with one twin and then the other until our parents came home. They were complete opposites. Jamie would play with us, help us with crafts, took us to the park and the public library, and occasionally took us out for ice cream. We loved spending our time with her. Then there was Jessie. She didn't do any of that stuff. She would spend most of the time sitting on her phone and left my sister and me to our own devices. One day we were complaining that we were bored, so she took out her makeup kit and went to the bathroom. She spent maybe 10 minutes doing her makeup while we watched. Then, when my sister complained of boredom again, note, she had undiagnosed ADD at the time and she hasn't been tested even now, but I'm fairly certain she's on the spectrum. She took out an eyelash curler. She then decided to use the thing on her. Both of us were scared of this thing because at the time we must have been 6, me, and 8, and we thought this thing looked like something that would be used to take out somebody's eye. Even though my sister was crying, Jessie still persisted to use the eyelash curler on her. Seeing my sister cry and having the same thought, I then started to cry because we were both terrified. We spent the rest of the day holed up in my sister's room until my parents came home. I don't remember either of them coming over after that, so I think we told our parents and they were both fired soon after. It's a bit trippy to be treated differently by someone who, while you're young, looks exactly the same. Kind of like a real-life Jekyll and Hyde. It's a shame that both of them had to be fired because of the one. Was there no way they could get rid of Jessie and keep Jamie? Jamie sounds awesome. Jamie could have spent the whole time with them and doubled her pay, basically. Story 4. My younger brother had a babysitter around the age of me. She was 15, I was 13, my brother was 5. She often flirted with me, but because of my past experiences with my biological parents, I had very little idea what any feeling other than hate was, so I was oblivious to this. Then, one day, she came over and did the usual, take care of my brother, flirt with me, etc. Then, about a year later, she came over again to do the usual, but I remember my brother took a nap, and she came to my room while I was studying for my final test of the year, sat on my lap, forced me to make out with her, and started taking off my shirt. I was too shocked to do anything, but thankfully my brother came to my room and saw her. He said what happened at the dinner table later that night, and I just looked down as I thought I was in trouble. She wasn't fired and still babysat him and did more weird things to me, but eventually she moved away and it ended. In case you were wondering, my biological parents abused me severely and often wouldn't feed me for a few days. They were later arrested for child abuse and theft and haven't seen them since, and now I'm with my adopted parents and feeling way better. Story 5. The first thing I had in mind was both babysitters I consciously remember were in different unorthodox Christian variations. We called all of these Jehovah's Witnesses at the time, but I'm pretty sure for the second one it was actually something else. But it wasn't really an issue. Perhaps it even taught me that people have different beliefs and they're valid as long as they don't possess direct danger. In fact, what was messed up with the second one is that she continuously made me do tasks a bit different than I was told to before, and she absolutely knew I was super repulsive to it. I don't know why exactly, but I guess I had some behavior issues at the time. Perhaps she had similar issues herself and was uncomfortable with me doing stuff not like she imagined. It would make her as discomfortable as she made me. Story 6. Had a babysitter who would spank anyone who upset her grandson. If he was annoyed or just disliked you, he'd complain, and everyone would just get lined up and spanked. On a good day, she would make all the kids lay down on the floor and sleep every morning until it was time to take us to school. If you ever sat up quietly, she would spank or otherwise threaten you. Always wondered why she refused to watch anyone over a certain age or size, and came to figure out when my brother and I were being kicked out that it was because she could only bully young, small kids, and once they were big and strong, they wouldn't take it anymore and fought back. Some people just never stop being bullies. Oh, and she ended up going to prison on a dozen counts of child abuse and neglect at the age of like 65 to 30. Well, glad they escaped the stuff that got her thrown in jail. Lay down on the floor? At least let them lie down in their beds until they're ready for school. This story reminds me of the South Park episode with Butter's grandmother, the one that was a real bully to him, even more than his parents. Story 7. I don't think I had any bad babysitters. I had one, and she was amazing. She worked at a water park, so one time she took me to the park. I got to play on the slides all day, and at the end, she let me pick out 3 toys from the gift shop, one for me and the rest for my siblings. She played with us, and she even organized Easter egg hunts for us. She was pretty cool. Edit. I remembered I did have a terrible one. When I was a baby, my parents made sure my diaper was always clean, and I didn't sleep in the dark or quiet. I went to this daycare babysitting place. Apparently, they locked us in a pitch-black room that was silent to sleep. And also, they wouldn't change my diaper immediately, so obviously I cried. When my parents came to pick me up, they found nail marks and red scratches down my back. Story 8. During most of my childhood, I had a new babysitter every month or so until my parents let me stay home alone before I was even 10. Apparently, I was a little troublemaker, which I find it hard to believe since I was the shy and quiet kid at school. Luckily, the only weird thing that ever happened was when I caught one stealing. I was just minding my business around the house when I found her at my parents' bedroom rummaging through the wardrobe drawers. I didn't even suspect anything and just asked her what she was doing, which she gave some dismissive answer, and I bought it. Later, I overheard my parents discussing about some missing money, and I told her what happened with the most innocent face ever. I don't remember what happened to her, but in the end, we got our money back. Story 9. One of my old housekeepers used to babysit. When I was about 4 or 5, I got out of bed to get a glass of water, and she was in our living room watching TV. I was not a restless kid and usually slept through the night, but instead of helping me and sending me back to bed, she brought me into my dad's garage to put me in the corner. The garage's floor was covered in metal shrapnel and the occasional cockroach, and I was barefoot. I was in that corner till my parents got home much later that night. I later found out that this woman never liked me, and she favored my younger brother to me. Thankfully, my parents fired her after a series of unprofessional behavior, like drinking my parents' alcohol, eating all my dad's birthday cake, and not doing her job. Eating all the cake. Was the babysitter planning on them not noticing? How do you justify that? How did they find out? Did the parent initially think the kid ate the cake? I wonder how that whole situation evolved. Story 10. Even friends of the family can be bad babysitters. My mom often left us with people that we considered family, but a couple of them were not very nice. Still, the worst babysitters I had were the couple that would walk around naked and often didn't pay attention to what I was doing. I escaped their house one time, ran all the way back to mine, and climbed up on my dad's motorcycle. Fortunately, my mom came home from work, and after she obviously got scared that I had gone missing from the babysitter, she drove to our house and found me there. I asked my mom if she gave them an earful about it, and she says that was the last time she had them watch me, and ended up quitting her job. Story 12. My uncle would put my brother and me in weird places. One time it was the laundry room, locked with a glass of water and a flashlight each. Another time it was the washer and dryer. Same thing with the flashlight and water. We would always do our best to escape or go back to annoying him. Whether it was jumping out of windows and knocking on the front door, climbing as high up trees as we could to try and fold them over like a slingshot in the cartoons, playing in Grandpa's shop, which was a hell no, or running up to the neighbors a mile away because they had a Super Nintendo. I honestly can't understand why he attempted to corral us somehow, especially in the winter. Story 13. I don't remember this since I was a baby at the time, but my mom told me that a dark spot in my left thigh was actually a scar that a housemaid, technically not babysitter, but she still took care of me apparently, was angry that my mom scolded her for something she did wrong. So of course, the rational and mature thing to do was to stab a baby's thigh with her fingernail in retaliation. She was promptly screamed at and fired. 22 years later, and just checking my thigh as I remembered this to write this story, and the dark spot is still there. Much lighter than it used to be, but still there. I have no scarring now, only a fingernail-shaped spot of darker skin. Story 14. Had 2 babysitters when I was younger. They were both female and siblings, one older than the other. I was first left with the older babysitter when I was 3. I think she was really kind and always took care of me, even though every time my mom left me with her, I would cry for the first few minutes. But afterwards, it was just fun, and she was really kind. My second babysitter I got when I was 6, and she was my babysitter until I was 8. She was younger, also really kind, and always took good care of me. And we would watch movies and stuff, and she'd let me play with their new dog that they got. And overall, they were great and kind people. And I'm grateful that I don't have any of these people babysitting me. Story 15. I was violated by my babysitter's husband. He had 3 kids with that woman and often babysat multiple kids at a time, but they never stuck around for long. Anyways, I told my mom one morning before school because I was too afraid to say anything before. Something in me just broke that morning, and I just started bawling my eyes out. After I told my mom, she confronted the babysitter, and the babysitter denied that her husband was capable of anything like that. She said that multiple kids had said the same thing before, and it was a lie. She also said that I had seduced him. I was only 7. I hope her children never went through the same thing, and I hope karma comes back and gets him. Story 16. My friend and I were once talking about kids and babysitters, and she said something like, "Ugh, I hate babysitters who scold you for everything and watch you while you're going to the bathroom." And I was like, I mean, if the kid is still potty training, then I can see why a babysitter would keep an eye on them. And she says, "But what if the kid is already 6 and is perfectly capable of using the bathroom by themselves?" And I go, "Is this personal experience?" And she says, "Yeah, this old lady used to watch me when I was little, and she's always yelled at me for everything and watches me in the bathroom." And I said, "Yeah, she's a weirdo." Story 17. I was being babysat by my older brother and didn't like what he'd made for dinner. I remember that he was really ticked off about this, and he called my parents. They told him to send me to my room and lock it from the outside. I had a padlock on my door for some other stuff. Not the safest household, not gonna lie. He tried to send me to my room, but I, being 5 or 6, didn't want to go and threw a fit. He picked me up and threw me over his shoulder, then literally threw me into my room on the floor. Mind you, I was about 3 foot at the time, and he's 6'7". I was the one who got in trouble thanks to autistic textural discomfort. Story 18. I didn't know so many parents were paranoid about male babysitters. When I was a teenage boy, I was frequently asked to sit for my parents' friends. It was always a blast. I'd play wrestle with them, play zombies, where I'd give them Nerf guns and they'd shoot at me while I was pretending to be a zombie. I'd blow raspberries on them if I caught them in order to eat them. I'd pick them up and carry them around. The only real difference between teenage boy babysitters and teenage girl babysitters is teenage boys will give kids lots of hyper rough and tumble play. Story 19. I asked my mom if I ever had a bad babysitter. She told me that one time she came home to country music blaring loudly on the speakers, and the babysitter was upstairs vacuuming. My mother stood there wondering where her baby was and looked down to see me on the floor next to the speakers that were playing loud music on one side of my head. My mother was not happy about the situation, so she found a better one. As a side note, my mother said I couldn't crawl yet. I was just laid there and was looking uncomfortable. Story 20. Back when I was 9, I had a female babysitter that turned out to be a real sicko. Weeks after being told she isn't allowed to babysit me and my 5-year-old sisters anymore, and after an incompetent bus driver dropped me off at the wrong address coming back from school, the chick tried to kidnap me as I was walking to my cousin's house, which was right by where I got dropped off, as well as that place being my old address. Luckily, one of my uncles caught her in the act and beat the dog dump out of her for that. She got locked up afterwards. My uncle, thankfully, didn't. People who spoke up during a wedding objection. Story? Viewer edition. Story 1. Cousin's wedding. I was like 5 to 16 at the time, around the time the preacher said, "Or forever hold your peace." I kid you not. The bride's brother came into the room and shocked the whole crowd with the fact that he checked the family tree last night and, well, had a DNA test on both bride and groom. Turns out they were related. Yeah, not the whole distant cousin thing. Like the groom was the son of an uncle who moved away and went no contact with the whole family for years because the family cursed him out for doing some illegal stuff. We were not living in a small city. Sister's brother dude rechecked the groom's ancestry night before the day of the wedding because he wanted to see why no one on his side of the family showed up. Bride asked us not to be looked into, but Big Bro was drunk and he loved his K-dramas. Thankfully, the bride wasn't carrying by the time we found out later. The whole family hunted down said uncle. Turns out he just moved away by a city. A lot of fighting was involved, couldn't remember much, but my recent new cousin threw his own dad out the window. Nearly unalived him, too. Also ended up with a snapped neck. Dude was charged, but the judge was a family friend who was at the wedding and got him a light sentence, and the guy recently got out, and the family's been supportive of him since he got out. And the bride, she moved away, like all the way to New Zealand, never to be heard from again till she learned he got out. They talked over Zoom, got all their emotions and feelings out of the way, and remain friends to this day. We later learned she was now working as an English teacher over there and was dating a guy who works as a pilot. So she has it made. As for the cousin who figured out he was our cousin, well, he's doing real nice for himself these days. Not like he has it made, but the whole family welcome him with open arms. He now helps out at one of our aunt's restaurants and works full-time with one of my cousins at his construction company. As for the uncle, who no one has seen since forever, he's been living his life no contact as usual, but this time he moved away more than just one city. The man drove all the way to the other side of the country, not the U.S. Okay, that was a roller coaster. Not because all of the drama. Not because all of the ancestry drama. That story was just one big run-on sentence. On my script, there are no punctuation marks anywhere on that thing. I really had to donate some brain cycles to try and make sense of it while I was reading it. I hope that made sense to you. Story 2. So I got one. At my best friend's sister's wedding, we both served in the armed forces, and he asked if I would join him to it. So I met his sister. Kindest person you could ever meet. Husband was a bit of a good what? Good person? I'm going to say good person. But you could tell he was head over heels for her. No, really. He tripped and tumbled several times before coming to rest at her feet when she called him over to introduce us. Then this banshee of a demon hellspawn arrived. Seems it was their mother. After the first 5 minutes of this woman going off and getting the bride in tears, I look at my buddy and we nodded and then proceeded to carry the women out kicking and screaming, and people applauding. That's not where this day ends. Day of the wedding, somehow she's in the audience sitting next to an elder gentleman and what I assume to be their son. Me and my buddy change our seats to directly behind them. Preacher reached, "If anyone has any objections." This woman jumps out of her seat like she just sat on a tack and started to yell, "The bride is a—" That's as far as she got before my buddy put a rag over her mouth and she went to sleep. Her husband stood up and I stood up with him. Husband sat back down. Their son sees this and seems to all of a sudden shrink slightly and find his shoes to be the most interesting thing in the world. Buddy sits the mother back in her chair. I check her pulse and announce, "She's had a really bad day, but she'll be fine." Guests cheer and laugh, and once it started to die down, we hear, "Boo! No blood!" which gets another round of laughter. Lady was fine. Had a hell of a headache when she came around. But by that time, most of the festivities were over with. The bride still retells that story when I visit. My buddy is a proud uncle, and I'm a proud godfather. Wow! Way to step up. This mother just wanted to make everything about her. She didn't care whose wedding she ruined. And this was definitely not the first time she acted like this, judging by everyone else's reaction. I swear, these two acted like ninja ushers. Story 3. I remember reading a story about a bride that had a big brother who was a major jerkwad growing up, always playing pranks on people, and almost getting beaten up from one of them. Bride and family were chuckleheads into thinking that since it's her and her fiancé's wedding, he'll behave for once. When the priest asked the question, the brother stood up immediately, and to the bride's horror, he said, "I want to say that my sister is pregnant with my friend's baby." Fiancé kinda knew about his pranking, but not to this extent. So the wedding was ruined because fiancé left angrily, and the bride was sobbing her eyes out while the brother was also running for his life after getting sucker punched by his dad and almost attacked by more people. In truth, she was never pregnant and never slept with anyone but the fiancé. Brother was banned and disowned after he finally came out with the truth. It took a couple years, but bride and fiancé got married without the waste of oxygen. Also, the brother was in his 30s. I don't blame the family for that kind of banishment. The man is a real-life troll. Did anyone believe this guy at first? This guy single-handedly delayed a wedding for 3 years. This poor woman was accused of something she had nothing to do with. What a jerkwad. Story 4. I have a friend who is a minister and was asked if he ever officiated a wedding that ended up being canceled. He mentioned one time he, the groom, and the wedding guests were waiting for the bride and bridal party to turn up. And when they did, the bride and bridal party are inappropriately drunk. Like they can barely stand. Possibly not going to remember what happened the next day level of drunk. Turns out the bridal party decided to celebrate a little too early just before the wedding. The minister had to take them and the families aside in another room and explain to them, in that state, neither she nor her witness could legally sign the paperwork for the marriage because they were not in a state of sound mind to be able to do so. He suggested they sober up and come back the next day, which they did. Bride hung over, but sober. The guest turned up again for the second go, and he married them then. Story 5. My younger sister got married in June of 2022. Her husband has been a dear friend of the family and a man that has had money problems in his family. During the wedding, the courthouse wedding, that is, my mother objected, saying that she had someone richer in mind for my sister. The best man, my brother-in-law's best friend, jokingly jumped at the objection, being like, "Now that's interesting," which my brother-in-law didn't really like. For context, my sister isn't exactly spoiled, but she is a bit extravagant. If she were to marry a billionaire, she would have the time of her life, mostly because she wants so many things that she doesn't really need. Anyway, my mother then explained that it was just a joke, and we all had a good laugh as the ceremony continued. I'm German, so the courthouse wedding is the one to be counted as married. You can have a ceremony and a reception, but you need someone from the courthouse to officiate. Otherwise, it doesn't count. Story 6. This is what happened at my dad's wedding. I was his best man, which was truly an honor since our relationship had been rocky and at times awful most of my life, only getting better in recent years. We get to the church venue and start to finish the decor. Being that I had the rings, my younger sister asked me if I could pretend to propose to her, and I did it for the laughs. She said no, and at this point in time, all her romantic encounters have ended in travesty. Afterwards, my dad and his bride-to-be were arguing during the ceremony over who should get the rings first, with me as the awkward man in the middle of them thinking, this is ridiculous. I shoved one of the rings to my dad and said, ladies first, and my dad put the ring on her finger, and lastly, we arrive outside to see people playing bagpipes. I will not elaborate further. I gotta say, there are worse things to argue about during a wedding. It sounds like a polite contest. No, you first. Oh, no, you first. It's a good thing it got sorted out. Story 7. When I was about 5, I was the flower girl at my aunt's wedding. I remember absolutely none of it because I apparently fell asleep not long after my grandpa, the pastor, rest in peace, started the ceremony. I just curled up on the altar next to the bridesmaids and took a nap. My great-grandmother, also rest in peace, actually went to the church's nursery and got me a pillow and blanket. My whole family finds it hilarious, and I'm a little embarrassed about it looking back. Though, in my defense, my grandpa was a very passionate preacher and had a tendency to drag out his sermons way longer than necessary. He apparently wound up doing this at the wedding, too, but he was really happy and proud to see my aunt, his youngest child, get married. He also apparently never noticed that I slept through the whole ceremony until it was brought up at the reception. Story 8. This is actually a proposal story rather than a wedding objection story. When I was a kid, I went hiking with my uncle and his girlfriend at some local hiking trail in our area. When we were done, I was asked to sit in the car while they went out to talk. I didn't hear what they were talking about, but I could see both were very happy with each other on the way home to drop me off. Turns out my uncle had proposed to her, but I, for whatever reason, just didn't notice or understand what that was all about. Making this funnier was that they didn't even tell my parents the good news when they dropped me off. It was actually during the wedding that this story was made public when the preacher called me out during the service in regards to the event. It was my one moment of glory. Story 9. Secondhand story. A friend of mine confided in me that his old crush was about to get married with a supposed jerk and told me that he would do it. I told him that maybe he should instead try talking to her beforehand rather than crash on her day and make it awkward for her and her family. He told me that I didn't get it. I didn't see what happened, but I saw the aftermath at the front of the church, where cops were taking testimonies. I heard that a fistfight ensued and somehow degenerated into a full-on brawl. The wedding got canceled, and the friend cut ties with me because I didn't back him up. The guy that broke up the wedding was delusional. It's sad that a friendship ended. It's probably for the best, though. I think this guy should have warned the girl ahead of time. Maybe keep an eye out for the guy at the wedding. But what was the reason this wedding was canceled? Couldn't the groom see this was just some knucklehead crush? Story 10. Do have one. My uncle was in his 4th marriage. 4th? With a nice girl that we all agree was his true significant other this time. My uncle's best friend would miss out the most of the start of the wedding, but showed up for the party. He was dealing with delicate matters in his own family, so my uncle completely understood. Everything was going well. Then the priest started to ask the objection part, and my uncle's friend appeared behind everyone and screams, "Wait!" Everyone was shocked looking at him, while he recovered himself because he looked like he had run an entire freaking marathon. He takes a deep breath and says, "Ya folks got the rings mixed up. These are yours." Story 11. Okay, so this guy I had been in love with for years was having a wedding, and since we were in a small town, word got around quickly. And since I was uninvited by his lovely bride-to-be, I showed up. Her entire family was wearing shades of pastels as she walked down the aisle like a pageant queen in her gown shaped like a pastry. When the pastor said, "Speak now," I stood up as I watched people's eyes go from happy to horrified. But I look at him and say, "You are not the kind of guy to be marrying the wrong girl." We met up at the back gate of the church. We lived happily ever after. Speak now, random girl's version. If you know, you know. Story 12. A guy objected in my friend's wedding back in 2019. Turns out it was a guy who admitted he was stalking her and watched her every move since college. He begged for her to give her a chance to prove himself a better man than the groom. No one knows who he is. Being the best man, I had to intervene. I got some friends of ours to help me escort the guy out of the church. Once we were out of there, I hoisted the mongrel in a firearms carry and deposited him next to a police officer outside. All I said was, "This dude confessed to stalking the bride, so he's your problem now." Then I walked back to the ceremony. Good guy, best man. Acted swiftly and correctly. This is probably the only wedding where the bride had to take out a restraining order before going on her honeymoon. She probably tried to convince the husband to move to whatever exotic location they went to for their honeymoon. Story 13. My best friend became engaged to her abusive high school girlfriend months after graduation, i.e., "I'm sorry I called you stupid and fat. If you take me back, I'll marry you. No one else can love you like me anyway." When she told me she'd proposed, I was like, "Oh, really? That's nice. Do you have a date in mind?" She was really upset that I wasn't all excited. I was very excited, however, when they broke up, and when her now wife properly proposed. You better believe I would have objected had she married her first girlfriend. Story 14. I imagine when the parents say they object, their daughter did not want to see them for a very long time, since there's no way you can have any time with the in-laws and not feel the tension in the air. Same with the brother who just has a problem with whipping it out. He does it on purpose to make people uncomfortable, especially a sibling. I imagine if they have the nerve to ask the question of why they don't see the married couple, it would be a facepalm through the head because it's a big duh answer. Story 15. I was at my uncle's wedding, and when the dude says, "Does anyone have any objections?" the smallest tiny dude, must have been like 3, stood up and said, "Yeah, 'cause you said you were gonna buy me a fishing rod, but you didn't." Then the mom of that kid stands up, whips out a picture, and it turns out that it was of the bride cheating on the groom, my uncle. The wedding got canceled, and the bride was sent to the hospital after 3 women and 2 men beat her up for sleeping with the groom's brother. Story 16. My girlfriend, my stepsisters, and I all objected to my mom marrying my ex-stepfather. It should say something when even his own kids thought he was a piece of poop and she shouldn't marry him. Thankfully, we proved him wrong when he said he'd destroy us and we'd never work anywhere again after he left. It took years to recover from debt, but now Mom is enjoying living the influencer life and being the envy of her friends. And I'm doing okay, I guess. Never did learn to trust in checks again, though. Story 17. Objections at weddings are legal or financial reasons, not petty feelings got hurt. Examples are party already being married to another, pre-existing vows of celibacy or commitment to the church, being underage without parental consent, or close blood relations, said fiancé is abusive, and more. So, yes, you can object as long as it has a legal or valid reason that would go against the state. Not, "I'm an ex and I feel petty," or "I'm a parent and I don't like the fiancé." Those are not legal reasons to object, and the court will laugh them out. Story 18. I was hired to play some music at a wedding of people I didn't know. All the groomsmen were classically decked out in basic black, except the father of the groom. He was wearing a black tux with Warner Brothers cartoon characters on his tie and cummerbund. I asked someone about it. Apparently, the father of the groom was something of a joker. The first time his son brought his fiancée home to meet the family, the dad looked shocked at his son and said, "She doesn't need to lose weight." Story 19. If they ask the question about if anyone knows any reason why they should not be married, if anyone speaks up even as a joke, then legally the wedding needs to be called off until investigated. Friend attended a wedding where the best man made the joke. My friend told me the story later where he had become a minister and was asking if we wanted that question to be asked. Some churches have a policy where it must be asked. Story 20. My son, 2 at the time, shouted out, "Don't do it, Auntie," leaving out name to protect the guilty, as soon as she got to the altar. No idea why. He was also the page boy, so was right up front. I was a bridesmaid and was mortified. Everyone just laughed and it went ahead fine. She does say now she wishes she listened to him, since he was obviously right as they recently finalized their divorce.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.